Julian Maris had mopped the marble floors of Halberton Industries for 12 quiet years, never asking for more than a paycheck and a corner locker for his things. The executive swept past him every day without so much as eye contact, except for the occasional nod if he happened to hold the elevator for them. He was the first to arrive before dawn and the last to leave after midnight, his gray coveralls marked with the company's logo that had faded from hundreds of washes. No one knew that before fate had landed him here, Julian had lived an entirely different life, one filled with skills he'd buried under silence, shadows, and guilt. Most mornings were the same, but this one began with a chill hanging in the air that he couldn't explain. As he wheeled his cart of supplies through the empty lobby, he glanced at the massive mural of Raymond Halberton, the CEO and founder, staring above the reception desk with that familiar look of sharp authority. Julian pushed down the uneasy stir inside him and focused on his work. Nothing ever changed here. The building began to stir around 7. Secretaries arrived with coffee and gossip, managers barked orders on their phones, and the elevators chimed like clockwork. Julian kept to the halls and service corridors where his presence blended with silence. Then, just after 8, something unusual happened. The executive elevator doors opened, and Scarlett Halberton, the CEO's 7-year-old daughter, rushed into the lobby in her school uniform with her backpack hanging open. The girl usually arrived calmly with her nanny, always holding a stuffed fox in her hands. But today her eyes were red, tears streaking her cheeks. Julian was wiping down a brass railing when he heard her frantic footsteps. She scanned the lobby with trembling shoulders, then ran straight toward him like she'd been searching for him all along. They hurt my mom, she gasped, almost choking on the words. They beat my mom. She's dying. Please help. Julian froze, the rag dropping from his hand. For a moment, he could only stare at her, stunned that she'd even noticed him, let alone come to him with something like that. Around them, no one reacted. Executives in suits walked by in a rush, assuming the child was upset about something trivial. Everyone always assumed. Scarlett grabbed Julian's sleeve with both hands, her small fingers digging into the fabric. She said not to call Dad. She said they'd come back. You have to come now, please, please. Julian's mind sharpened like a blade at the words. He knelt down to her eye level, his voice low and calm in a way that immediately steadied her. Where is she? In the parking garage, she cried. In the corner by the loading docks. She can't move. She said to find someone who wouldn't tell security because they might be with them. I saw you yesterday fixing the nurse's cut. You knew what to do. Please come. So she's seen that. He thought he'd been careful. 2 weeks ago, a floor nurse delivering paperwork had slipped on the stairs and split her palm open. Julian had stitched it in the maintenance room with a precision that had made her stare. He'd asked her not to speak of it, and she hadn't, but the girl had watched. He didn't waste another second. He left his cart where it stood and lifted Scarlett into his arms so she wouldn't have to run. As he moved briskly across the lobby, the receptionist blinked in surprise but said nothing. No one stopped him. The elevator to the underground level opened and closed before anyone could question why the janitor and the CEO's daughter were together. Scarlett clung to his neck, whispering through sobs. They said she knew something about Dad's companies abroad, something they didn't want people to see. They followed us from school. She fought them off and told me to run. She told me to find help, but not from the guards. When the doors opened in the dim parking garage, Julian's instincts took over. This wasn't the first time he'd stepped into danger, though no one in this building could have imagined that. He scanned each corner, listening for movement. The air tasted like oil and concrete. Tires clicked far off, but nearby lanes were empty. Which way? He asked. Scarlett pointed shakily toward a far section, hidden behind large concrete columns. He carried her swiftly but silently, keeping close to the shadows. As they rounded the final support beam, he spotted her mother, Elena Halberton, slumped against the back wall of a service bay. Her blouse was torn, her face bruised, and blood seeped through a makeshift bandage at her side. She was conscious, but barely, one hand pressing the wound. When she saw them approach, fear flashed in her eyes, then confusion, then unexpected relief. You found someone? Julian set Scarlett down gently, then immediately knelt beside Elena. Without a word, he assessed the injury. The stab wound was deep, likely from a knife or jagged object. No major artery struck, but blood loss was significant. Her breathing was fast but controlled, meaning she was fighting to stay conscious. "You need a hospital," he said quietly. "No hospitals," she whispered, wincing. "They'll find us there. Please, my daughter, just get her somewhere safe." Julian looked at her, and something unspoken passed between them. She saw something in his eyes, something that didn't match the man who mopped floors. He reached into his coveralls and took out a small pouch he hadn't touched in years. Inside were medical tools, hemostatic gauze, sterile strips, needle, and suture thread. Scarlett stared wide-eyed as he cut the fabric away from the wound with hands that didn't shake. Elena sucked in a breath but didn't cry out. He cleaned the area, packed the bleeding, and stitched the torn flesh with precision and speed most surgeons would envy. When he finished, he wrapped it tightly and checked her pulse. Elena blinked slowly. "Who are you?" "Someone who used to fix worse," he said simply. He helped her sit up and leaned her gently against the column. Scarlett held her mother's hand, tears streaming again. "Is she gonna die?" "No," Julian said with absolute certainty. "Not today." But danger was still close. Elena gripped his wrist weakly. "There were 3 men. 2 left when they thought I was down. 1 stayed to search the car for my phone. He could come back." Julian's expression hardened in a way Scarlett had never seen on any adult before. His voice dropped lower. "Show me the direction he went." Elena tried to protest, but he was already scanning the garage. Scarlett pointed left, toward the ramps leading to the loading docks. Julian stood up, then paused and looked down at the girl. "Stay with your mother. Don't make a sound unless you're in danger. If anything happens, you run to the stairwell and lock the door behind you. Understand?" She nodded, though her lip trembled. Before he left, he pulled a small black object from his boot, a tactical folding knife with a worn grip, the kind not sold in hardware stores. He disappeared into the shadows with the silent confidence of someone returning to an old language. The concrete floor felt familiar under his boots. Every echo told him where he was relative to every corner, every hiding place, every blind spot. He moved past parked cars without brushing them, eyes sweeping for motion. At the far end of the garage, the thud of a trunk closing broke the silence. Julian pressed his back to a column and peered around it. A man in a dark jacket was rummaging through a black SUV, cursing under his breath. He was tall, built thick, and had a gun tucked under his waistband. His knuckles were bloodied, the kind of fresh bruises made by punching someone defenseless. Julian circled quietly behind him, his footfalls masked by the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. The man pulled out Elena's phone and smashed it on the ground, grinding it under his heel. Just as he reached for his own phone, Julian's presence sliced the air. "Looking for something else?" The man spun, surprised, but the knife at Julian's side wasn't raised. Not yet. The attacker sneered when he saw the janitor's uniform. "You picked the wrong day to play hero, pal." Julian didn't blink. He took a step closer, with his hands loose at his sides. "You are going to walk away, now, and you're not going to come back for them." The man laughed, reaching for his gun, but he never made it. Julian closed the distance in a flash, his arm twisting the attacker's wrist before the weapon cleared its holster. A sharp crack sounded as the man's hand slammed into the SUV door. The gun clattered to the floor. The man swore and swung with his free fist, but Julian flowed beneath the punch, striking his elbow into the man's ribs with a force that knocked the breath out of him. In 2 seconds, the man was face down on the concrete, his arm pinned behind his back. Julian pressed a knee between his shoulder blades and held the knife at the back of his neck, not touching, but close enough that the man froze. "Listen carefully," Julian said, voice barely more than a breath. "You'll leave this city tonight. You tell whoever sent you that she's not unprotected anymore. If they try again, I won't stop with just you." The man trembled, sweat beading on his forehead. "You don't know who you're dealing with." Julian's eyes darkened. "I do." He zip-tied the man's wrists with a strip from his pocket and dragged him behind the SUV, out of sight. Then he took the gun, removed the magazine, and tossed the weapon into a drainage grate. He kept the magazine in his pocket. When he returned to Elena and Scarlett, he found Elena attempting to stand, gripping a bumper for support. Scarlett was helping her, fear and determination warring in her small face. Elena's eyes widened with relief when she saw Julian. "Is he gone?" she asked. "For now," Julian said. "We need to move." Elena tried to walk but faltered. Without a word, Julian lifted her carefully into his arms. Scarlett followed close behind, clutching her mother's purse and the stuffed fox she'd dropped earlier. They reached the stairwell Julia had mentioned and slipped through the heavy door. Inside the maintenance corridor, Elena's breathing slowed as she leaned against the wall, but her eyes remained sharp. "They wanted documents," she murmured. "Files from the overseas branch. I emailed someone I trust last night. They must have intercepted it." Julian didn't ask questions, though a dozen moved through his mind. He knew better than to stay in one place. The security office couldn't be trusted, and calling the police might ignite something bigger. Scarlett tugged his sleeve. "Can we take her to your room? The one with the lockers and the first aid box?" Julian considered it. The maintenance wing was deep in the building's lower level, far from public areas and rarely patrolled. He nodded and led them down the hallway, unlocking a steel door with his master key. His locker room was small and unremarkable at first glance: a metal bench, a sink, a medicine cabinet. But behind another door, disguised as a utility closet, was a space unknown to everyone but him. A hidden supply room he'd converted into shelter years ago when the nightmares of his old life still stalked him. He eased Elena onto a cot and checked her bandages again. Scarlett curled up beside her, refusing to leave her mother's side. Elena touched Julian's wrist again. "Why? Why did you help us like this?" Julian paused, his jaw tightening. "Because no one else would." He didn't talk about the past, the missions, the languages, the lives he'd saved, and the lives he'd taken. He didn't speak of the day he walked away from that world covered in blood that wasn't his, vowing never to use his hands for violence again. He had buried all of it under the guise of a quiet janitor with tired eyes. Yet now, in the hum of the hidden room, surrounded by the trust of a child and the desperation of a wounded mother, the past no longer felt like a ghost, it felt like a weight he was ready to lift. Scarlett watched him with a strange certainty. "I knew you weren't just a cleaner," she whispered. Julian didn't smile, but something in his gaze softened. He checked the door locks again, then fetched supplies to make Elena more comfortable. Outside, the building moved on with business as usual, unaware that everything had just changed. And as the hours passed and danger edged closer, the truth about who Julian Maris really was and what he was still capable of would become something no one in that tower would ever forget.